Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. Ukraine War news update, second part thereof for the 4th of February 2024. I'm going to probably have to record half of this, then shoot out to my boys' sports practice, and then come back and do the second half. So if I look a bit different then, that's why. Right, let's go to the aid segment, the military aid and equipment section. Belgium's proposed to plan to the G7s, that's a group of seven most sort of powerful, biggest economies in the world, suggesting the issuance of debt for Ukraine's reconstruction using frozen Russian assets as collateral. If Russia refuses to pay, the plan allows allies to tap into the blocked Russian assets, bypassing legal hurdles. That seems a pretty decent plan going forward. That's reported in the Financial Times there. The G7 developing nations to support Ukraine in securing funds by leveraging Russian assets as financial safety net is how the Kyiv Independent interprets this. Group of 7 countries are developing strategies to issue debt to support Ukraine, utilizing Russian assets as a safety net for repayment. According to G7 officials familiar with the discussions, a proposal plan involves Kyiv's allies raising debt to provide financial support for Ukraine and demanding that Russia repays the debt. If Russia does not repay the debt, the countries would then seize frozen Russian assets. I say go for it. Ukrainian women here from Cherkasy region helping the Ukrainian army. They have learned how to make metallic brackets to reinforce dugouts. This saves a lot of lives. So proud of our women. This coming from a TikTok. The kind I like to meet. A bit of classic rock and roll there, or a bit of Roy Orbison, actually. Pretty women. They're doing their job to support their troops on the front line. This is fantastic. This is like home production facilities to help in the defense of Ukraine. And actually, we're going to return to that idea here. So, and this is something I've been saying over the last week repeatedly, which is the official stats. Say, for example, Russia claiming that they're producing 300,000 drones a month, and Ukraine claiming they're producing 50,000 drones. You're thinking Russia producing 6 times as many. Then you look at the stats from the front line, and it's not transferring to the front line. Those stats are either you're stockpiling drones for no known reason, other than maybe you can't train drone pilots quickly enough, or you're not producing that many. And Ukraine, on the other hand, are producing a whole load. Russians are saying that they're being out produced. On the front line, at least, are saying, well, they're getting more drones than we are. Some of the sources. So you're thinking, that doesn't marry with what some of the statistics are supposedly. And then there are also all of these areas of drone production that might not be counted by official statistics as well. So this is Dicky Shershny, a group of FPV drone producers, and what they have produced, at least according to War Translated here, over the weekend. I don't know if this is just literally a weekend's worth of work, because it looks phenomenal. These are used by a variety of units, and you look there and you say, okay, that's not official kind of government production there. Is that being counted? I don't know. And then here we have Dmitry from War Translators saying Russians are majorly worried about FPV drones. Almost every influencer expressed their opinion about this recently, contrary to how Russia handles the production of drones, where one company took over most of the business. In Ukraine, they spread production across many small enterprises. We heard recently there's 200 enterprises involved in the production of drones, and that's not to mention what's going on outside of Ukraine with all the allies, the drone coalitions, the UK putting £200 million into it, other nations providing heaps of drone capabilities and capacity. But the chances are, he says, Russians will catch up. It's our job as individuals to help Ukrainians keep the distance in innovation as far as possible away from the Russians by supporting small enterprises. So here are some Russian sources. Enemy, the Air Assault Regiment, 328th Air Assault Regiment. Enemy in Krynki continues increasing, so the enemy being Ukraine. Artillery shelling compared to last week. Possibly supply of ammo was carried out. The main problem is assaulting this settlement is not the unmined territory in full control of airspace. Some translation issues there. Anyway, unmined territory and full control of airspace by Ukrainian drones, which gives them the opportunity to actively use all available weapons, but poor communication and with neighboring units. And maybe it's saying it's not that the Ukrainian drones have control of the airspace, which you might think is a problem, but actually it's poor communication between our units. The issue is not in devices, but in that personnel is often relocated or replaced, and everyone considers communication unimportant. If they want, they can get in touch themselves. This all leads to casualties that could have been avoided. Simple communication about mined areas, characteristics of combat in specific areas, and at a minimum, information about our movement and combat missions. Friendly fire exists. In other words, poor communication is causing them to shoot their own people, but also within that, the idea is it's not that the Ukrainians have got control of the airspace, which they do. The implication is they do have that. So that is itself an issue, but not for this person the most prevailing issue. Someone else says, I just talked to the general staff in the morning. In one of the frontline areas, the difficulty of the situation is related precisely to the unmanned aerial vehicles. This is true almost everywhere. Unfortunately, there is, to put it mildly, something to work on. This is our Achilles heel. One of them, Vladimir Putin. To understand what exactly the president means, it's worth reading the analysis and talks to something that Putin has said about this. In short, Russia and Ukraine have a fundamentally different approach to the development and production of FPV drones. The Ukrainian approach is described in detail in the Wall Street Journal. Quote, Ukraine has set a goal to produce 1 million FPV drones at the facilities of small dispersed enterprises. The Sparrow Avia workshop in western Ukraine is one of dozens of startups producing thousands of FPV drones every month. Currently, 62 types of FPV drones are produced in Ukraine. Work is constantly underway to develop them so that they fly further, carry more load, and have good protection from electronic warfare. Only one enterprise consisting of a couple of dozen employees produces 3,000 FPV drones per month and plans to increase production to 10,000 FPV drones per month. Most of the parts are made by 3D printers independently. And he goes on to say, in Russia, on the contrary, one powerful manufacturer has taken over almost everything. Their drones, by the way, are good. But when the Ukrainians learned to fight these drones, they immediately achieved a serious advantage at the front. So serious that the president is talking about it. The Ural team producing the Ghoul drones miraculously survived. They are really excellent. They can be put into operation in a matter of minutes, and there are already ground and air repeaters, but there are only a few of them. This is the idea that, as some people like Andrew Perpetua is saying, the Russians have some technological advantages in their drones in certain areas, but it's not to scale. I mean, the problem is you can kind of be all like, oh, that's a real problem. The Ukrainians are screwed, but actually it's only a problem if there's a meaningful application of those drones, as in at scale, and that doesn't appear to be the case. So serious. But there are only a few of them. There are other guys, but this is tiny on a scale of the front of 1,200 kilometers. This is one of our biggest problems at the moment. This is a real challenge for the Ukrainians, for the Russians, as according to the Russian sources. I think the Ukrainians at the moment are in a good place with drones going forward in terms of production, procurement, and hopefully in terms of being able to train more drone operators than the Russians. French HPD-2A2 anti-tank mines are in service in the armed forces of Ukraine. This is triggered by an induction center that detonates the shape charge when a vehicle passes by. Just to show you that there are some French pieces of kit on the front lines being used. They don't often shout about what they provide to the front line. And here we are now going to what's going on in US politics with regard to US aid to Ukraine. Biden administration opposes a House bill on aid to Israel without additional money for Ukraine, the White House has said. The US House of Representatives next week will consider a $17.6 billion aid bill to Israel without aid to Ukraine, House Speaker Johnson has said on Saturday. Now, this was what I reported last night in my breaking news update. So Speaker Johnson is going to put a bill to the floor to be voted on, but it doesn't include any aid to Ukraine. That's one thing. Second, it's emergency aid to Israel, where Israel doesn't really need it. Third, as far as I understand, it's doubling the aid that Israel asked for. But this is politicking. What is happening is pure politicking. This is like, right, Ukraine's become a partisan issue. We don't want to give Biden anything, but the support for Israel is very strongly supported by the Republicans, particularly, actually more than Democrats, given some of the more left-wing Democrats will be supporting Palestine in that conflict. Here, this is a case of doing some serious politicking that is unjustifiable when you look at really what's going on in the world and what Ukraine needs and why the US should be supporting Ukraine, in a bipartisan, very obvious bipartisan way, but they're not. This is political opportunism, and it is of the worst sort. And Speaker Johnson needs to be absolutely hammered for this. I'm absolutely adamant that this is not cool, right? Why you would be trying to force through funding to Israel urgently when Israel don't urgently need funding in the same way that Ukraine do, and refusing to put Ukraine support into a bill. It's despicable, in my opinion. Julie Davis here says, in case anyone needs a reminder, this was never about the border. Republicans are sacrificing Ukrainians to put Putin in order. Sacrificing Ukrainians to Putin in order to undermine Biden and help Trump. Let's listen to the people themselves, right? Before you attack me for, I don't know, being anti-Republican or something, let's just listen to them. Representative Troy Nails says, why should Republicans agree to a border bill when that would help Joe Biden's approval rating? Why would we do anything right now to help him? He's hemorrhaging. He's bleeding.
Why would we do anything right now to help him with that 33%? Do you believe if Joe Biden's approval rating was at 53%, we would even be talking about the border? We wouldn't be talking about the southern border. But he has to do something because he's hemorrhaging. He's bleeding. Why would we do anything?
There you go. I mean, that tells you all you need to know. They're not going to do a deal on the border because it will help Biden. And so, therefore, by extension, they're not going to do a Ukraine aid bill unless that bill gets split. And there was talk about the bill getting split, but they split Israel and not Ukraine aid. This is freaking despicable, in my opinion. And I know there's many of you Republicans out there, but I don't know how you can't be as incensed as some of you are. Some of you are, but some of you are still banging on about how it's Democrats' fault and how Trump is the right person, etc., etc. I don't know how that is justifiable. I don't know how you can be there and seriously think that Ukraine need this aid, and yet it's the Democrats' fault and it's Trump is wonderful. I don't get it when Republicans are saying very clearly what is going on here. It's not the Democrats holding this up. This is Republicans holding it up for political opportunism. It's that simple. And the White House has rejected the bill of the House of Representatives on the aid to Israel without additional money to Ukraine. Quote, just as legislative text is imminent, the House Republicans come up with their latest cynical political maneuver. I would agree with that. It is a cynical political maneuver. And now you're starting to see loads of memes come out of, Putin pulling the strings of Mike Johnson, that Mike Johnson is a kind of traitor, all this kind of stuff. There are all of these memes hitting the internet. And actually, apparently, Mike Johnson has been a little bit perturbed at how much he is being portrayed poorly on the internet. Well, good. You should wake up to the truth, mate. Yeah. So did you hear that, fellas? Moscow Mike is concerned that your loud shouting about his treachery is reaching his voters. Keep pressing because Speaker Johnson is a traitor. Hashtag shouldn't be anywhere near the a US House of Representatives. Apparently he is, there's some confirmation that Johnson is concerned by the Moscow Mike narratives and hashtag Speaker Johnson is a traitor. But did you know he's also at odds with his state's governor over okay, basically you can get into some long weeds of politics in there in terms of what he's doing domestically, but with regard to Ukraine, it appears that some of the criticisms are finding their mark there. And indeed, let's listen to Speaker Johnson himself.
From 30,000 feet, how do you see foreign policy and Congress's role in terms of putting America first?
The Biden foreign policy is a disaster. Everybody knows it. It's so dangerous because we're projecting weakness on the world stage, and as we
if I was in that room with him there, I would not be able to restrain myself. I would become, I think, almost physical with that. I find that disgusting that he can sit there on national TV and blame Biden for a weakness of foreign policy when he is the one, almost the one, preventing effective foreign policy being then enacted and aid, for example, to Ukraine and Indo-Pacific getting to the places it needs to be. I find this despicable.
Dangerous because we're projecting weakness on the world stage. And as we say all the time, that invites aggression. That's why all of our adversaries around the world are acting so provocatively. We didn't have any of this under President Trump, remember? You know why? Because
give over, sunshine.
They knew that he had a strong hand. It's critically important, as Reagan used to remind us, that we maintain peace.
Trump had a strong hand. There you go, Trump. You can do everything you want with your hands. Look at Biden's weak hands. Oh yeah, I've tied his hands behind his back. Oh yeah, but he's got weak hands, hasn't he? Yeah, I did that.
Through strength. We have to project strength, and we're simply not doing that right now. And that's why this is so dangerous.
Despicable human. Do not like him. Sorry. That's that. Anyway, on to geopolitical stuff now. Okay, so I have returned from a morning and early afternoon out at my boys' rugby. So now back on with the geopolitical news. I reported this in a breaking news update yesterday or very late last night. Tucker Carlson has been spotted in Moscow, apparently a 3-day trip. Rumors that he's going to interview Putin. There is no way that you interview Putin and Putin doesn't give you the permission to do so and therefore control the narrative. There is no way there's going to be an interview of Putin and it doesn't come out making Putin look good. In other words, all Tucker Carlson would be doing if he is indeed interviewing Putin is doing Putin's bidding, is producing content that is to the benefit of Vladimir Putin. There's no way, and therefore this is just massively ill-advised, unless, of course, you want to do the bidding of Putin and you want to produce content that is beneficial to Putin. Tucker Carlson is either a useful idiot or indeed a Russian agent in some kind of sense, right? That's how it is as far as I'm concerned. I think this guy is doing despicable work. Enough said. Tim White says Poland's foreign minister deleted a tweet where he said he was flying to the USA to convince him to give aid to Ukraine. So this was after Hungary changed their mind and basically didn't veto the EU 50 billion euro aid package, and Viktor Orban fell into place, and the EU were unanimous, and Hungary didn't have to demand anything. There was no concessions. It seemed really positive as far as aid to Ukraine was concerned, as far as European unanimity was concerned and unity. And so rather than go and visit Hungary and sort of do work with Viktor Orban or the foreign minister there, Poland's foreign minister said, I'm going to go to the US to try and convince them to give aid to Ukraine. After Hungary changed its mind, Sikorsk then wrote, quote, turns out that it is worth talking to the unconvinced. So I'm flying to Washington to convince the unconvinced there. In the end, he didn't actually... Well, no, sorry. In the end, he's deleted that tweet because obviously it could be seen as quite insulting to the Americans or something like that. February the 2nd, he had said, news anchor announced, this is my last Oh, no, sorry. This is something else. I thought that was your man there. I thought that's Sikorsk. This is another thing that I wanted to talk about as well. Sorry, my brain's not quite in the right place at the moment. So this is a Ukrainian news anchor announcing that this is my last broadcast before mobilization. I'm asking you to join the ranks of the armed forces of Ukraine. There is no other way to victory, he added. I think this is important. This is talking to the need for Ukraine to mobilize, talking to the challenges for those still in Ukraine who haven't mobilized, because do you know what? It's not an easy thing to do. You might very much be in support of the Ukrainian position, kind of in an abstract sense, like myself, doing all that I can to promote a positive vision of what Ukraine is doing with accuracy, of course. And showing that the Ukrainians are in the, adopting the moral high ground. But it's then another thing entirely to say, and I'm going to go and put my body on a line with a very significant chance that if I do that within the year, that I might not be alive still. That's a really different thing, and it's another level of bravery. So I'm not saying that promoting like what I do is anything like bravery, not at all. But this is just taking it to another level to say, okay, I'm willing to back my rhetoric up with the courage of saying I'm going to put my body on a line for those ideas. So when a news anchor, I presume a fairly famous Ukrainian news anchor, says I'm going to join the ranks of the Ukrainian armed forces, that is really significant, very useful for generating some kind of renewed, possibly a renewed sense of, I guess, a renewed movement to mobilize. Whether he will end up being on the front line, whether he'll end up doing some of the kind of job for the armed forces, I don't know. But they're going to need all the help they can get in terms of renewing the desire to go to the front line to fight for the country. Those who will have wanted to very strongly, defend their nation by mobilizing and going to the front line will already have done so. You're going to be left now with the Ukrainians who might be very pro-Ukraine, very up for the defense of Ukraine, obviously, but not so up for putting their bodies on the line. So we are now in a situation where the Ukrainians that are left are going to need to be chivied along to mobilize. And that's a challenge that the Ukrainian politicians have, which is how do we mobilize people going forward such that we still keep an active economy, we still maintain a population that is able to keep the economy afloat. If we go for mass mobilization, there is a chance that many of those people will flee and leave the country to go elsewhere. So not only are we not going to get those people on the front line, but we are also going to lose them from the economy, from contributing to tax income, so on and so forth. Real big challenge for the Ukrainians, that mobilization thing. Anyway, here is staying on the kind of Poland subject, and I did talk about this yesterday. I do not know whether Ukraine will be able to return Crimea, but I believe that it will be able to return Donetsk and Luhansk, said Polish President Duda. So he said that he has kind of clarified that, or not kind of walked it back, but tried to be a lot more positive in the outlook. So I reported that yesterday. At the same time, head of state noted that even the Russians managed to keep at least some Ukrainian territories, it will be victory for them. Quote, and then the possibility of a new attack from Russia will be very high. He has kind of, as I say, not walked it back, but renewed his rhetoric for support from Ukraine, because that was seen as a little bit controversial. It might be a little bit realistic, but a lot of people are like, hey, hang on, dude, that's not cool for you to say that it's unlikely that Ukraine are going to get back Crimea. So he came out yesterday and said a bunch of things that were very positive for Ukraine, but still that idea is out there in the information spaces. Giorgia Meloni, the Italian premier, was apparently a lead player in the mediation with Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban that led to Budapest dropping its veto against the EU package of 50 billion euros of aid to Ukraine. So as this person says, thank you, Giorgia Meloni, Ukraine and Ukrainian people are very grateful. It's interesting. So in the EU, with all the leaders in the EU, you have Viktor Orban, who sits very much on the populist right. You have Giorgia Meloni, who is leading a coalition of populist right and right-wing parties in Italy, but is also very pro-Ukraine, even though some of those parties that she is a coalition leader of aren't actually that pro-Ukraine. So you've got Matteo Salvini and you've got Silvio Berlusconi, or at least he's recently passed away. But those two parties, Forza and what's her name? Anyway, the Matteo Salvini's party are not known for being, strongly pro-Ukraine and actually very friendly with Putin. Arguably, Silvio Berlusconi saw Putin as his friend, and vice versa. So here's someone who is in possibly one of the better positions. I often talk about, in order to convince people to a different position, you need to come from within their in-group. So if someone from the out-group comes to try and convince you to do something that's different to what you want to do, that will result in this. What you want is, instead of, smacking heads against each other from differing positions, you want someone from within the similar position as you to nudge you to change direction. And actually, Giorgia Meloni is much more likely to be within a kind of in group for Viktor Orban, and so therefore she would be in a much better position than, say, Emmanuel Macron or Olaf Scholz. Someone like that, far less likely to convince Viktor Orban to do something that aligns with the EU's vision. This is unsurprising to me that Giorgia Meloni played a key role there. A group of 13 British MPs and 5 peers, so from the House of Lords, House of Commons and House of Lords, signed a joint letter to Foreign Minister David Cameron calling for Russia to be added to the list of state sponsors of terrorism. I don't know what the ramifications of that would be, what the kind of legal situation is, or formal situation is with a designation of a state sponsor of terrorism. I'll have to look into that. But from a kind of general rhetorical position, that would be very cool for, is probably the wrong word, but I think it's important. I think it would be incredibly significant if Britain formally declared Russia a state sponsor of terrorism. It would again downgrade their position in world politics vis-a-vis how at least Britain sees them. The letter cites Putin's barbarism and the destruction caused by the war, emphasizing that such a designation would demonstrate international leadership and contribute to transitioning from freezing to seizing Russian assets. And there is the House of Commons letter, a joint letter calling for Russia to be designated a state sponsor of terrorism. So it gives a rationale there as to why they should be. You can read that at your leisure there by pausing the video. Right, Hungarian farmers are planning to start protests at one of the checkpoints on the border next Friday. This was stated by the head of the Association of Hungarian Farmers Groups and Organizations. In this way, they want to respond to the proposal to extend duty-free imports of Ukrainian goods to the EU. This is an ongoing issue that needs to be resolved. There are some genuine concerns that these farmers, it's not like these farmers are just overtly being pro-Russian or anything like that. They have genuine concerns about EU legislation where you've got a free trade bloc and you've got the EU being really kind or concerned about Ukraine and saying, right, you can come in and kind of be a part of this. We're going to help support you. And then they're coming in, but they're not in the EU. They're not contributing to the terms of funding, and yet their farmers or their hauliers or whoever it is are potentially getting the benefits of the EU without being signed up members. And so therefore farmers and hauliers inside the EU are feeling aggrieved by that decision and the decision to keep that those benefits, you know, available to Ukrainian hauliers and farmers and so on. And indeed, Poland is still having issues, or at least farmers and hauliers in Poland are still having issues with that too. So Poland has some issues and they are likely to continue impacting Ukraine. First off, the Polish Farmers Solidarity Trade Union plans to start a general strike on February the 9th, including blocking the Ukrainian border again. And this is significant because I think that's a different trade union than has been finding issues with the Ukrainian trade and situation, the aforementioned situation. So yeah, a lot for Donald Tusk to sort out in Poland still, as with Hungary. Okay, the office of the president of Ukraine announced the finalization of a security agreement with France, and that is the same with Germany as well. So Germany and France are reportedly to sign a security agreement, very similar to what has been signed with the UK. That was one of the first big ones signed, a security agreement with Ukraine that was seen as a blueprint to further agreements. And that, I'm sure, puts Ukraine in a good position going forward. So if this war came to, the way I read this, is if the war came to an end where, I don't know, Ukraine was forced by international partners to do a peace deal with Russia, to sign away parts of Ukraine or whatever, and you had this idea that that's just Russia's way of being able to hold on to what they've got at the moment, with a view to taking bigger chunks going forward. So maybe 5 years down the line, then they say, right, now we've reconstituted, we're ready to have a go and take a bit more. We're going to have Odessa and Mykolaiv this time. Well, if that's the case, then these security guarantees are a way of bilaterally for Ukraine saying, that ain't going to happen. Although we might not be in NATO, we have some formal guarantees from these big nations, Germany, France, UK, and a number of other European nations at the moment to say, we have security guarantees from these countries that if you try and do that, there will be more formal defensive postures from those other nations to support Ukraine. So I think that's really important. That's how I understand it, but without looking at details, I can't be sure. Japan is to host over 200 businesses at a conference promoting Ukraine's economic recovery. Around 100 businesses from each from Japan and Ukraine are slated to attend a Japan-Ukraine Economic Reconstruction Conference in Tokyo later this month, according to Japanese media outlet Kyodo News. And finally, Finland is extending the closure of its border with Russia for another month amid hybrid war concerns, information war, and other types of doing warfare, like, for example, the idea, as according to the Finnish government, that Moscow is, promoting, motivating migrants to go to Finland to cross the border to cause social cohesion problems. It's a kind of form of warfare, this. It's not fighting with weapons, but it's fighting with, say, information, fighting in other ways. It's hybrid warfare. We're going to unsettle that country by doing this and that. So as a retaliation, Finland, seeing that Russia are doing that or claiming that Russia are doing that, are going to keep the border closed for a further month. And there we have it. There's probably lots more to add, but I haven't been trawling the socials to get more information. That will come tomorrow. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. Take care. I may or may not get some more videos done today. It's going to be a super busy day for me. I'm just behind on lots of personal family stuff and trying to get myself ready to go at some point this month to Ukraine. I've got an awful lot of stuff to do, and so therefore, I'm up against it at the moment with regard to content provision. But here it is for you. Take care. Speak soon.